will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions, and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. The test is in 4 sections. At the end of the test, you will be given 10 minutes to transfer your answers to an answer sheet. Now turn to Section 1. Section 1. You will hear a telephone conversation between a passenger and an official at the Land Transport Information Service at Toronto Airport. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 5. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Hello, this is Land Transport Information at Toronto Airport. How may I help you?
Oh, good morning. I'm flying to Toronto Airport next week and I need to get to a town called, Milton. Could you tell me how I can get there?
Milton, did you say? Let me see. I think that's about 150 miles southwest of here. In fact, it's 147 miles to be exact. So it'll take you at least, say, 3 to 4 hours by road.
Wow, is it as far as that?
Yes, I'm afraid so. But you have a number of options to get you there, and you can always rent a car right here at the airport, of course.
Right. Well, I don't really want to drive myself, so I'd like more information about public transport.
Okay. In that case, the quickest and most comfortable is a cab, and of course there are always plenty available, but it'll cost you. You can also take a Greyhound bus, or there's an airport shuttle service to Milton.
I think for that kind of distance a cab would be way beyond my budget. But the bus sounds okay. Can you tell me how much that would cost?
Sure. Let's see, that would be $15 one way or $27.50 return. That's on the Greyhound.
Ah, that's quite cheap. Great. Whereabouts does it stop in Milton?
It goes directly from the airport here to the city center, and it's pretty fast. But you have to bear in mind that there is only one departure a day, so it depends what time your flight gets in.
Ah, of course. Hang on. Oh, we're due to get there at 11:30 a.m.
Too bad. The bus leaves at 3:45, so you would have quite a wait, more than 4 hours.
Oh, I see. Well, what about the shuttle you mentioned?
Okay, that's the airport shuttle that will take you from the airport right to your hotel or private address. It's a door-to-door service, and it would suit you much better because there's one every 2 hours.
So how much does that cost?
Let's see. That's $35 one way, $65 return. So I guess it's a bit more expensive than the Greyhound.
Oh, that doesn't sound too bad, especially if it'll take me straight to the hotel.
But you do need to reserve a seat.
Okay. Is it possible to make a booking right now, through you?
Sure.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 6 to 10. Now listen and answer questions 6 to 10.
Okay, I just have to fill this form out for you. So, what date do you want to book this for?
The 16th of October. Oh, no. Sorry, that's my departure date. I arrive on the 17th, so book it for then, please.
So that's the Toronto Airport shuttle to Milton. And this is for just one person, or...?
Yeah, just me, please.
Right. And you said your expected time of arrival was 11:30? So if I book your shuttle for after 12, let's say 12:30, that should give you plenty of time to, collect your baggage, maybe grab a coffee.
Yeah, that sounds fine. As long as we land on time.
Well, we'll take your flight details, so you don't need to worry too much about that. Now, what about the fare? What sort of ticket do you want? One way or...
Yeah, that'll be fine, provided I can book the return trip once I'm there.
No problem. Just allow a couple of days in advance to make sure you get a seat. And what is your name, please?
Janet Thompson.
Is that Thompson spelled with a P?
No, it's Thomson.
Okay. And you'll be coming from the UK? What flight will you be travelling on?
It's Air Canada flight number AC936 from London Heathrow.
Right. Now, do you know where you'll be staying? We need to give the driver an address.
Yes, it's called the Vacation Motel, and I think it's near the town centre. Anyway, the address is 24 Kitchener Street. That's Kitchener Street.
That's fine. Right, so that's $35 to pay, please. Have you got your credit card number there?
Yes, it's a Visa card, and the number is 3303 8450 2045 6837.
Okay. Well, that seems to be everything. Have a good trip, and we'll see you in Toronto next week.
Yes, bye. Oh, thanks for your help.
That is the end of section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to section 2. Section 2. You will hear a woman called Alice Bussell talking on the radio about the Dolphin Conservation Trust, an organisation which tries to protect dolphins. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 15.
Today we're pleased to have on the show Alice Bussell from the Dolphin Conservation Trust. Tell us about the trust, Alice.
Well, obviously its purpose is to protect dolphins in seas all around the world. It tries to raise people's awareness of the problems these marine creatures are suffering because of pollution and other threats. It started 10 years ago, and it's one of the fastest growing animal charities in the country, although it's still fairly small compared with the big players in animal protection. We're particularly proud of the work we do in education. Last year, we visited a huge number of schools in different parts of the country, going round to talk to children and young people aged from 5 to 18. In fact, about 35% of our members are children.
Oh.
The charity uses its money to support campaigns, for example, for changes in fishing policy and so forth. It hopes soon to be able to employ its first full-time biologist with dolphin expertise to monitor populations. Of course, many people give their services on a voluntary basis, and we now have volunteers working in observation, office work and other things. I should also tell you about the award we won from the Charity Commission last year for our work in education. Although it's not meant an enormous amount of money for us, it has made our activities even more widely publicised and understood. In the long term, it may not bring in extra members, but we're hoping it'll have this effect.
Is it possible to see dolphins in UK waters?
Yes, in several locations. And we have a big project in the east part of Scotland. This has long been a haven for dolphins because it has very little shipping. However, that may be about to change soon because oil companies want to increase exploration there. We're campaigning against this because although there'll be little pollution from oil, exploration creates a lot of underwater noise. It means the dolphins can't rest and socialise. This is how I became interested in dolphin conservation in the first place. I had never seen one, and I hadn't been particularly interested in them at school. Then I came across this story about a family of dolphins who had to leave their home in the Moray Firth because of the oil companies, and about a child who campaigned to save them. I couldn't put the book down. I was hooked.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20. Now listen and answer questions 16 to 20.
I'm sure our listeners will want to find out what they can do to help. You mentioned the Adopt a Dolphin scheme. Can you tell us about that?
Of course. People can choose one of our dolphins to sponsor. They receive a picture of it and news updates. I'd like to tell you about 4 which are currently being adopted by our members: Moondancer, Echo, Kiwi and Samson. Unfortunately, Echo is being rather elusive this year and hasn't yet been sighted by our observers, but we remain optimistic that he'll be out there soon. All the others have been out in force. Samson and Moondancer are often photographed together, but it's Kiwi who's our real character, as she seems to love coming up close for the cameras, and we've captured her on film hundreds of times. They all have their own personalities. Moondancer is very elegant and curves out and into the water very smoothly, whereas Samson has a lot of energy. He's always leaping out of the water with great vigour. You'd probably expect him to be the youngest. He's not quite. That's Kiwi. But Samson's the latest of our dolphins to be chosen for the scheme. Kiwi makes a lot of noise, so we can often pick her out straight away. Echo and Moondancer are noisy too, but Moondancer's easy to find because she has a particularly large fin on her back, which makes her easy to identify. So, yes, they're all very different.
Well, they sound a fascinating group. And how would you go about...
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to section 3. Section 3. You will hear a tutor talking to 2 business students called Philip and Janice about their research on managing individuals. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 23. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 23.
Well, you've both been looking at different styles of managing individuals in companies and the workplace. How's the research going, Philip?
Well, I've been looking at why individualism, individual differences, are such an important area of management studies. When you think about any organisation, be it a family business or a multinational company, they're all fundamentally a group of people working together. But it's what these individuals contribute to their places of work that makes you realise how important they are. Of course, they bring different ideas, but it's also their attitudes and their experiences of learning. Diversity is important in these areas too.
So why do people behave so differently from one another at work?
There are lots of reasons, but research has shown that a lot of it comes down to personality. And the other factor is gender. It's a well-known fact that men and women do lots of things in different ways, and the workplace is no different.
Did you look at the effects of this variation on companies?
Yes, I did. On the positive side, exposure to such diversity helps encourage creativity, which is generally an asset to a company. But unfortunately, individual differences are also the root of conflict between staff, and they can lead to difficulties for management, which can sometimes be serious.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 24 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 24 to 30.
Thanks, Philip. So now I guess the two main things to remember here are to identify individual talent and then to utilize it. So, Janice, you were looking at identifying different talents in workers. Do you think this is easy for managers to do?
Well, currently, teamwork is in fashion in the workplace. And in my opinion, the importance of the individual is generally neglected. What managers should be targeting is those employees who can take the lead in a situation and are not afraid to accept the idea of responsibility.
That's true, Janice, but unfortunately many managers think the entire notion of encouraging individuality amongst their staff is far too hard.
Yes, that may be true. But I think one of the most important tasks of managers is to consider the needs of the individual on one hand and group cooperation and conformity on the other. It requires creative thinking on the part of management to avoid tension.
So, Janice, what kind of people do you think companies should be looking for?
Well, it has to start from the very beginning, when companies are looking for new employees. When the personnel department is choosing between applicants, they need to look for someone who's broken the mould and can think for themselves. Instead, people making these decisions often use a range of psychological tests to see if a person is a problem solver or will do as they're told. I'm not convinced these qualities are actually the most important.
So do you think being a good team player is overrated?
No. It's not overrated. You do need to learn the rules and learn them fast. No individual can get around this if you're working in an organisation.
So how should managers deal with this?
Rewards. When an individual demonstrates the behaviour the organisation expects, some kind of incentive can be given. What's important here is that this happens right at the beginning, so new recruits learn the rules of the system immediately. Also, the incentive should be something the individual actually wants, and this isn't always just money.
To come back to you, Philip, you were saying that recognition of good performers is essential. Now, what else should managers be looking for?
Well, managing people means you not only have an understanding of your employees, but you also recognise the culture of the organisation. In fact, for some organisations, creativity and individuality may be the last thing they want to see during working hours.
Very true.
Yes, but managing people isn't as easy as it looks. For example, change in the workplace can be quite tricky, especially if there's a need to increase profit. And at times like these, managers may have to give priority to profit rather than individual staff needs.
Yes, and that creates difficult situations for people.
Yes, but what's important is that managers are able to deal with quite high levels of personal stress. During times of change, they should be thinking not only about the strain on their staff, but take time out to think of themselves.
Absolutely. So, what are the implications of that?
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to section 4. Section 4. You will hear part of a lecture about leadership introducing a theory called self-regulatory focus theory. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Today, I want to talk about self-regulatory focus theory and how the actions of leaders can affect the way followers approach different situations. Self-regulatory focus theory is a theory developed by Torrey Higgins. He says that a person's focus at any given time is to either approach pleasure or avoid pain. These are two basic motivations that each and every one of us has, and they cause us to have different kinds of goals. Promotion goals in different life situations emphasize achievement. Prevention goals are oriented towards the avoidance of punishment. In a specific situation, our thoughts might focus more on promotion goals or more on prevention goals. The theory suggests that two factors affect which goals we are focusing on. First, there is a chronic factor. This factor is connected to a person's personality and says that each person has a basic tendency to either focus more on promotion goals or focus more on prevention goals as part of his or her personality. Second, there is a situational factor, which means that the context we are in can make us more likely to focus on one set of goals or the other. For example, we are more likely to be thinking about pleasure and to have promotion goals when we are spending time with a friend. In contrast, if we are working on an important project for our boss, we are more likely to try to avoid making mistakes and therefore have more prevention goals in our mind. Research has shown that the goals we are focusing on at a given time affect the way we think. For example, when focusing on promotion goals, people consider their ideal self, their aspirations and gains. They don't think about what they can lose, so they think in a happier mode. They feel more inspired to change. When people are focusing on prevention goals, they think about their ought self. What are they supposed to be? What are people expecting from them? They consider their obligations to others. As a result, they experience more anxiety and try to avoid situations where they could lose. Now that I have talked about the two focuses and how they affect people, I want to look at the idea that the way leaders behave, or their style of leading, can affect the focus that followers adopt in a specific situation. In talking about leadership, we often mention transformational leaders and transactional leaders. Transformational leaders, when interacting with their followers, focus on their development. In their words and actions, transformational leaders highlight change. Their speech is passionate and conveys a definitive vision. All of these things can encourage followers to think about what could be. In other words, they inspire a promotion focus in their followers. In contrast, transactional leaders focus on developing clear structures that tell their followers exactly what is expected of them. While they do explain the rewards people will get for following orders, they emphasize more how a follower will be punished, or that a follower won't get rewarded if his or her behavior doesn't change. In short, they emphasize the consequences of making a mistake. This emphasis will clearly lead followers to focus on avoiding punishment and problems. This is clearly a prevention focus. In conclusion, it is important to understand that one focus is not necessarily better than the other one. For a designer who works in a field where a lot of innovation is needed, a promotion focus is probably better. In contrast, a prevention focus, which causes people to work more cautiously and produce higher quality work, might be very appropriate for a job like a surgeon, for example. The main point of the research, though, is that the actions of leaders can greatly influence whether people approach a situation with more of a promotion focus or more of a prevention focus.
That is the end of section 4. You now have half a minute to check your answers.